All right, so let's get started. I've kind of fallen into the rhythm now of putting out a boot camp before every holiday. It seems like the thing to do, and that is to say that this is going to be. I'm excusing myself from being interesting tonight. That is to say, my job tonight is to give you all of the information that you need, and I think this is really important, and we should be prepared for the holidays. And at the same time, then once I compile all the material, I'm like, oh, but I'm just going to be jamming information down your throats. This isn't going to be interesting. But we'll try to make it interesting. But the point is that we really leave feeling like we know how to, and in this case, it's really just the how-to of lighting the candles. We rabbis, when it's time to come and talk about Hanukkah, we usually talk about the story of Hanukkah, and we'll get into, was it, there's a miracle in the story, but also there was a military battle, and what's the true meaning of Hanukkah, and that's where my mind goes with Hanukkah, and not just rabbis, but that's sort of when I was growing up. I also had some sense of the kind of the story, the mythos behind Hanukkah, and then you come to the actual menorah, and you're like, wait, how does this go exactly? Or where do I stick the thing? And like, how many blessings are there? There's more than one blessing. So I know I have felt that way, and I have to say, I still feel that way. I mean, it's like, there's just like once a year, and it is not that big an occasion. It's like, we don't feel the same pressure to gear up for Hanukkah because it's like such a fun holiday. It's like, you just light some candles and you're done. But the question is, how exactly do you light those candles? So we're gonna really try and download that tonight. I have put together a little source sheet for you all, and actually, so I've just put it in the chat. And actually, the truth is, I've tried to. Usually, I just present the text and we discuss them, but I've tried in this session to actually extract the main takeaways from every text and to kind of give you a source sheet that you can have and study on your own. And even if you had to leave early today, I think you could just take this and get most of the information that you need. So hopefully that'll be helpful as well. Okay, let's begin. And as I said, we're only going to really look at the candles tonight because there are other things about Hanukkah. We could talk about some of the extra prayers that we say during our morning prayers. And we could talk about general customs around not mourning or doing more work than you have to on Hanukkah. And it's true, there's a kind of a general feeling of celebration in this week. But one of the reasons I love Hanukkah, and I have to say, I think it's my favorite holiday, and it's because I'm a lazy person. And this is like the most bang for your buck. It's like you light the candles, they're beautiful, yay, you're done. And then you go out and well, not this year, but go out and party. So it really, in some ways, all does come down to these candles. And part of what I want, if I were to try to make things interesting tonight, part of what I would want to investigate with you all, and so I kind of invited as we go, is I want us to be thinking as we put together the laws of lighting candles, what exactly are these laws meant to accomplish? What is this ritual? We're going to sort of see it being constructed, and every little detail in it has a kind of a purpose or a meaning, and often there are debates. Should the detail go that way or that way? Because does it mean this or that? And the classic one is, should we light 1 candle to 8 candles or 8 candle to 1 candle? That's one of the classic debates, and different reasons are given for each of those positions. So we're mostly going to look at the laws themselves, but along the way we'll try and consider what's going on here. What are they debating? What are they trying to do? And hopefully we'll leave with a full knowledge of how to do this, but also with some sense of what is this candle lighting ritual really meant to achieve? What does it mean that such a ritual was constructed? Because after all, Hanukkah, along with Purim, is not a biblical holiday, right? It's a holiday that the rabbis came up with. They invented, and that's a very different. We know that the rabbis have great interpretive powers that often look a lot like legislative powers. Like they interpret, they turn things, they shape our tradition, and yet to just come up with a holiday out of nothing is quite different than trying to figure out what Sukkot is. That's that holiday in the Torah. How do we play it out? So it's a different operation. All right, I'm already talking too much, so let's get into the material. And to get into the material, what I want to do, one of the things that is nice about Hanukkah learning is that it really all comes down to one page in the Talmud. This is an interesting thing. There is no volume of the Talmud devoted to Hanukkah, as there is for Purim. So it's not just that it's a rabbinic holiday. There's no volume of the Talmud devoted to Hanukkah. And not only that, it makes a very strange appearance in the Talmud. I said that we tend to focus on the story and then wonder about the laws, but the Talmud actually goes the opposite way, very, very Talmudic of the Talmud, which is to be buried deep in the intricacies of ritual. And then suddenly, and this is one of the kind of the wildest moments, I think, in the Talmud, and I'll show it to you, and then we'll back up. Suddenly, there's a voice. We're discussing all these rituals, and suddenly there's a voice in the Talmud. Look at the discussion of rituals here. Discuss, 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 and then suddenly someone pipes in and says, "Wait, what is Hanukkah?" I mean, think about that. These are like the rabbis, the people who basically put our religion together. And one of them is in the middle of the Talmud, the sort of he must be embarrassed all these years later. One of them's like, wait, I don't even know what you're talking about. What is this holiday? Okay, and that gives you a kind of like a sense of just how kind of rough and sort of inchoate this holiday is when it first appears. It first appears in the tractate of the Talmud, the second tractate of the Babylonian Talmud of Shabbat. And that makes sense because Shabbat is another holiday that we light candles for. So they're talking about what kinds of candles we light on Shabbat. And there's a long discussion. Luckily, the Hanukkah discussion is shorter, but the Shabbat discussion, do I use this kind of candle? Can I use this kind of oil? Can I use this kind of wick? Right? And then all of a sudden, they're talking about candle lighting, and they start kind of, it seems like along the way, start mentioning, well, what about when you light the Hanukkah candles? When do we do that? And how do we do that? And they're discussing, and then suddenly someone says, wait, can you remind me what Hanukkah is again? Right. So, and we're not going to do that tonight. We're not going to go into what was Hanukkah, what's the deep meaning of Hanukkah, though I will just one last time remind you that I almost feel like it's like, Rabbinical School 101. This is how you teach Hanukkah. You tell them that it's either about the miracle or the military battle, right? Like, I bet you've heard that class before, right? If you've ever heard a Hanukkah class before. So, but that's important for us to keep in mind, that there is a little bit of a kind of vagueness around even what Hanukkah is meant to be commemorating or celebrating. Is it the great military victory where we pushed back the encroaching Greek army and we defeated them and we won? And is that what this is really about? Or, as we kind of all learn it as children, is it about like there was only enough oil for one night and it lasted for 8 nights, and that's what Hanukkah is all about? Another time we can sit and chew through that, but let's now get into the laws. I want to say that I'm gonna be doing a lot of the. You can see that I'm nervous. I'm always nervous when I'm doing all the talking. I have a kind of a teaching principle, which is like the more I can draw you into conversation, the better. And I'm not going to be doing much of that tonight. So I have this nervousness, like, oh, you see, this is what I call a bad class. But just remember, this is like vegetables. You're getting your vegetables, you're getting information. But having said that, if you have any questions along the way, please don't hesitate to interrupt, because it'll be that kind of thing. We're just going to be clicking through, clucking maybe even through, clicking through various Hanukkah laws. And if anything's confusing on the way, just unmute yourself and say, wait, I have a question, right? I will try to keep eyes on the group, but we'll be moving through this text. Okay, I'm gonna, I think just in case anyone came late, I'm just going to, one more time, put the source sheet down in the chat so that you can look at that if you wish, but as always, I'll share it. Okay, so now let's head into that page of the Talmud, Shabbat 21b, and just by reading through it, we can immediately kind of extract a lot of the core basic laws of Hanukkah. We'll be well on our way, and then we'll pick up with the discussion many centuries later when the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, picks it up in the 1500s. Okay, any questions so far? Now that you can see how nervous I am to be talking this whole time. Any questions so far? All right, here we go. So we're having this discussion about Shabbat candles, and all of a sudden, Hanukkah gets brought into the mix, and this is the first thing that they say definitively about Hanukkah. Mitzvata mishetishka chama ad shetichle regel min hashuk. The mitzvah of lighting Hanukkah candles, and they are giving it the language of mitzvah, right, commandment. It's a little bit funny because commandments theoretically are in the Torah, but the rabbinic commandment of lighting Hanukkah candles can be performed from sunset until, this is a funny language, tichla regel min hashuk, until there are no more legs in the market, until nobody's like walking around in the marketplace. Okay, so let me just pause there and just have us starting to think a little bit, not just taking in this information, because the information is there, it's true. Hanukkah lighting takes place between sunset, Shkia, and whenever the activity in the streets, the sort of market commerce activity ends. And as you can imagine, that's a somewhat not subjective but contextual boundary there. That is, it seems like in New York City, Hanukkah goes all night, right? Whereas in Peoria, Hanukkah may end very early, right? In quarantine, right? Like maybe Hanukkah, maybe your chance for lighting candles is actually much shorter because you have to get it by the time businesses close. Okay, now I can't resist asking you to interpret this a little bit. Let's just think about those two. What a strange thing. And I want to emphasize this. There's something strange about the way Hanukkah laws are constructed. What do you mean? Like, do you do it before, like, while people are still out? Or do you have to do it at sundown? What are those two? Anyone have a sense of what those two brackets for this time period represent, or why you would structure it from one to the other? I like stir up anything? Yeah, Diana.
So that it can be seen, so that the candles will be seen by more people. So okay, the lights right. Dim.
That's right. The idea that you do it while people are still out fulfills a certain objective, which is that this is for people to see. This is a display. So then what's the language of when the sun sets? Well, that's just holiday language. That's when we light the candles. So just paying close attention to some of the details here. Diana, you want to pick up on that?
Well, I was also thinking, but isn't that also the same answer as well? Because you're not going to see the candles if they're lit in broad daylight.
Fair enough. Yeah, fair enough. You need it to be dark, right? So, okay, so fine. So maybe this is just like finding the best time. It's when people are out, right? Okay, yeah, I think that's a perfectly solid interpretation of the laws. I just want to say that there is a time to light Shabbat candles, an actual time, right? And you have a little bit of wiggle room, but it's so that you can wiggle, not just like do it all night. So we're a little bit of a different paradigm here. And I think Diana's given us a helpful framework for it. But another framework for it would be that we're actually like sort of toggling between different paradigms. Is this a festival, a holiday where we try to kind of emulate the other holidays? Or is this something else, some kind of public display, kind of like putting a Christmas tree up at the Grove, you know, like something that people should see, okay? All right, so let's continue. Here we go. Okay, that is the first law that gets discussed, is when do you do it? And now you kind of know when do you do it, which is that you wait until it's sundown, and then you have until there are no more people left outside. I'll just add to that there's because of this long span of time, there's some question as to like, how long does the Hanukkah, is it supposed to burn that entire time? And some people are strict on that, but just a kind of a quick shorthand is that most people hold that the Hanukkah candle should burn for at least a half an hour, or about a half an hour. You know, if you're burning one candle down, that should be sufficient. Okay, so there's your window of time. Now here comes a discussion, like a kind of a now that we're talking about Hanukkah, it feels like the Talmud is saying, well, let's actually talk, what is the mitzvah of Hanukkah? Well, how does that actually work? And they have a kind of a formula for it. Tanu Rabbanan, mitzvat Chanukah, ner ish ubeito. So they try to come up with a shorthand, and the shorthand is candle, man, and his house. Ner ish ubeito, or to put that in English, the basic mitzvah of Hanukkah is one candle for every man and his household. And it's gendered there, but I think it's gendered specifically in the like head of the household way, right? So one candle for every household. That's it, which is, you know, I'm sure many of you are thinking, well, that's strange. That's not the way we do it. So that's level one. That is the basic mitzvah. You could fulfill the mitzvah with just one candle for your house. But the Mahadran, and Mahadran is like the elevated, the polished, the exalted version of the mitzvah, or the better way to do it, as I've translated here, is one candle for each person in the house. So you could have just one candle for the house, but it's better if everyone lights their own candle. And then level 3, and as for the Mahadran min ha-Mahadran, the best of the best, the very best way to do it, this is level 3, and there's a debate. And this is a debate you may have heard of before. It's a classic debate where the Beit Shammai, the school of Shammai, says on the first day you light 8 lights, and from there on you gradually decrease. And Beit Hillel, the school of Hillel, says that on the first day you light 1 light, and from there on gradually increase. Now we could spend time thinking about like, well, what's that all about? But one of the famous teachings on the difference between Hillel and Shammai is that Hillel believes in Ma'alin B'Kodesh, that you go up in holiness. You get bigger and bigger, elevate more and more. It's a sort of a beautiful spiritual idea. But let's just take stock of what we just saw. It's a very strange kind of way to introduce the mitzvah, which is you should just light 1 candle for every house, and you did it. But it's better if every person in the house lights a candle, right? But it's even better, it's the best thing, is if, well, actually, I'm not sure what this one is. Now, let's just assume, for our purposes, that we have gone down through history and embraced the school of Hillel's position, which means 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, that's what we do, right? Now, what is that last position? Is it that, can someone articulate it for me? On the first, the basic mitzvah is 1 candle for the house. The better way to do it is 1 candle for every person. And the best way to do it is what? Can someone just say it? Nobody wants to take the bait here because I'm kind of setting you up. Because it's not so clear. That is it the best thing is every person lights 8 candles? Or is it 8 candles for the house. They didn't really clarify that. The difference between 1 and 2 was one unit for the whole house versus every person doing their own thing. But the move in the second one just told us how many candles we add. So there is some disparity in practice around whether there's a Chanukah for the house or whether every person should light their own. And you can feel in the Talmud where those two sensibilities are coming from. I want to just say, kind of in parentheses here, that I just called it a Chanukah, and more commonly it's called a menorah. And sometimes you'll see people say, no, it's not a menorah, it's a Chanukah, like sort of like, I know the real answer. And they're wrong. That is, it is a menorah. It's just a particular kind of menorah called a Chanukah. And a menorah is just a word for lamp. But the classic menorah in the temple had 6 positions with one kind of sticking up, a light. But the Chanukah is distinct for having 8, right? So that's where those words are coming from. You'll hear people use both. Okay. Let me push forward just one more step, and then I want to kind of pan back and ask you what you think is going on here. So okay, we have the time for lighting, and we have the number of candles that you light, although that's a little unclear. By the end, we're not sure whether it's 8 candles or 8 times number of people in house candles. Okay. Here is here's the next law. Our rabbis taught it is a mitzvah to place the Hanukkah lamp at the entrance to one's house on the outside. Did you ever heard that? You ever seen that? If you've been to Israel during Hanukkah, you do see this. In fact, I think in my blurb for this class, I said, like, what's up with the aquarium, right? Maybe somebody read that and was like, what are you talking about? But I associate an aquarium with Hanukkah because these candles are placed outside, but the wind is blowing. So they're often put in these little glass, it looks like an aquarium to me, a little fish aquarium, right? So that is what they're doing when they place the Chanukah candles outside the house follows the Talmud. That is it seems like the ideal position, right? The last law, we saw them building up towards the best, but this is actually the best, it seems like. The best thing is to place it outside your house. Now, there are alternatives for people who are not able to do that. If one lives upstairs, one places it at the window adjacent to the public domain. And in a time of danger, one places it on the table, and that is sufficient. Okay, so 3 positions here. 1, put it outside your house. 2, well, if you can't put it outside your house, put it near the window. And 3, if there's danger, think about what would that danger be. If there's danger, you can put it not near the window, but just on the table in your house. First, I would love to just see a little bit by show of hands. What do you all do? Do you anyone put it outside their house? It's very uncommon in this country to do that. Very uncommon. What about put it by the window? Who puts it by the window? I'm seeing some hands, but I'm also seeing some no's. And who puts it on the table? Or puts it somewhere in the house. Okay, all right. So all of these positions are covered by the law, but what is going on in the law? What are they talking about? What's the danger? Yeah, Liz.
I think it would be a danger that if somebody knows you're Jewish, you could be under attack and anti-Semitism.
Yeah, I think that's right. If you made a public Jewish display and you'd have a rock thrown through your window and you know that, then it's okay to just do a Hanukkah inside, in private. But it's really, it's funny because why do you put the Hanukkah candles outside? Some of you may know this phrase in Aramaic. It's pirsume nisa, the publicizing of the miracle. In other words, the point of and Diana was saying this earlier, the reason that we do it while people are out, the reason we put it outside, the whole point of this is to proudly say, we are Jews and we stood up for our Judaism and we won. But that's an awkward thing to do when you're actually living under a threat and when you're still afraid for your safety because of your Jewish identity. So Hanukkah itself has a kind of anxiety that is interwoven with its laws. The laws mean to demonstrate a kind of public pride, but that in itself, we're not always living post-victory. Sometimes we're living in more fragile times, and that in itself. So the variance in practice, like when we are given these laws and we're given 3 different options, 2 different options, various options for how to do Hanukkah, we can listen carefully into and think about how these laws are framed and what they actually mean for the holiday itself, and whether the holiday is being like really carried out according to some kind of principle, or whether it's being modified in order to fit the times, the situation. Okay, one more law in the Talmud, and then we're going to move to. I just think it's so juicy that you can look at the page of Talmud here and get a lot of your Hanukkah material. Usually you can't just check out the Talmud. Usually the Talmud's a little like, you have to go sifting through the Talmud and then put all the laws together, but we have this one page here. And the last law that we're going to get from that page of Talmud is that one must kindle another light in addition to the Hanukkah lights in order to use its light, as it is prohibited to use the light of the Hanukkah lights. Okay, there is, now this other light we call the, I see some people mouthing it, the Shamish. The Shamish. And actually, that's like, the Shamish is like, a Shamish in a shul could be the person who helps out, the person who turns on the lights, actually, the person who makes sure everything is in place. And the Shamish, as the candle, is the candle that we use to light the other candles, and you can see why in the language here, which is that there's a principle that the light of Hanukkah is just for Hanukkah. It's just in order to do its Hanukkah work, to publicize the miracle, to like display beauty, to encourage us to feel warm and fuzzy and thankful towards God, but it's not to be used for light. So you're not supposed to read by the Hanukkah candle. You're not supposed to carry the Hanukkah candle around, helping you through your, it feels like your castle at that point, but like, you know, you're carrying the Hanukkah candle around. That's not the way it works. The Hanukkah candle is supposed to only have one use, and that is to display Hanukkah light, and therefore they shouldn't also be used to light one another. Technically, the law does say if you only had 8 candles, or you only had enough candles for that night, you could use them to light one another, but that's not the best way to do it. And again, you can feel a little bit like the Hanukkah laws are like, here's the best way to do it, but it's okay if you don't have that capacity. That's sort of like a messaging that we'll see throughout. Okay, and then as I said, all these laws, and then all of a sudden someone says, wait, what is Hanukkah? And they go on and they talk about what Hanukkah is. So let's just summarize what we've learned so far. Candle lighting takes place between sunset and whenever business closes in the marketplace. As I said, that actually is, I keep wanting to say subjective, but it's not subjective, it's contextual. It depends on the context. Okay, we've learned that while it seems like 1 candle per household is enough, and actually it's better to have every person lighting 1 candle. The best practice is if you go 8 candles from 1 to 8. There was some debate, but we follow the school of Hillel, and we go 1 to 8. And there is some lack of clarity as to whether everybody in the house lights Hanukkah candles, their own Chanukah, or whether there's just 1 for the house. I'd love to see this again, by the way. Can I get hands for everybody in your house lights their own menorah? Okay, yeah, I got a couple. How about just 1 for the house? There's like more. Okay, great. So as you, I'm not going to out anyone for doing something that's not permitted by the law. All these things are permitted by the law, but you can see some variance in practice here. Okay, so now what else do we have? We also learned that the ideal place to place the Hanukkah candles is outside the entrance. I think most people say on the left of the entrance. But if that doesn't work, you can place them in the window, which I think most of us do. And that's in accordance with the principle here, I've spelled it out, of Pirsumi Nisa, publicizing the miracle. But if there's any danger, you can light in a more private space. And then finally, we use a separate light called the Shamash to light the Hanukkah candles. And that is so that we don't use the Hanukkah candles. We'll return to that principle later on. We don't use the Hanukkah candles. That'll be one of the liturgical things that we actually say later on. Okay, so now that's what we got from the Talmud. And I didn't want to, I wanted you to see the Talmud itself, and that gives us actually a lot of the laws that we need. But to round out our understanding of the Hanukkah laws, we're gonna fast forward centuries into the future to the Shulchan Aruch, which is composed in the 1500s and is still basically the authoritative code of Jewish law, though it's obviously been reinterpreted and commented on now for centuries. The one thing to know is that it is written by someone who is a standard bearer for Sephardic practices. And so it usually is accompanied by someone we call the Ramah, Rabbi Moshe Isserles, who like comments on it, but also adds Ashkenazi practices. And we'll see that Ashkenazi Ashkenazi like the European, sort of like Northern and Eastern European, as opposed to Sephardic, the Spanish and across the water Mediterranean and North African. So we'll see that voice pop up as we go. Okay. So now let's talk about placement. We already learned something about placement, which is that you try to put it outside, and if not, you put it in the window, and if not, you put it on the table. But do you, how exactly, where do you put, do you need a little table for it? Do you put it on the ground? So the law is that one should place the Hanukkah lights higher than 3 hand breadths, 1, 2, 3. So it has to be at least this far off the ground. So you don't place the Hanukkah candles on the ground. And then the proper way, though, to fulfill the mitzvah is to place it lower than 10 hand breadths. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And at that point, that's probably, you're starting to get too high at that point. In other words, it should be at about, I don't know what a hand breadth is, but let's say waist level, right? And then they're imagining it outside the house, right? So you're placing it there about 5 feet high, or I don't know, maybe 4 feet high outside of the house. And that's fine, but if you place it above 10 hand breadths, that's fine, one has fulfilled one's obligation. But if you place it above 20 cubits, one has not fulfilled one's obligation. Okay, so basically there's a general area there that the Hanukkah candles should hover in. They can actually be placed higher and higher, but you can't put it up. 20 cubits is that's like 60 feet high. All right, so you can't put the Hanukkah candles that high. I think we're probably fine on that level. Okay, that's in terms of like actual where do I put this thing? But there are also questions about how do I place the candles next to one another? And here it's actually the Ramah who provides one of the laws that people sometimes are fastidious about, and that is that one should be careful to place the candles in a line and not in a circle, so they don't appear to be one big fire. Now, some people think that means that these fancy Chanukiot that twist around and all the candles are in a different place are not valid. But other interpreters, again, I'm not going to say anything that's going to make you throw out your Chanukiot. Other interpreters believe that, well, the point though is that the candles have to be distinct. You have to be able to see, looking at the candle, what night it is. Right? You have to be, that has to be visible. And as I say here in the sort of like summary, the reason for that is that the purpose of the Chanukiah is to publicize the miracle. And so if that's the operative principle, then the visual symbolism has to be, you have to be able to see it. It has to be perceptible. So it has to be somewhere close to your line of sight, and it has to be in a clear line with each light distinct. Okay? Any questions so far? No? Okay, great. Moving right along. That's placement. Now we have the placement like in terms of geolocation and also in terms of height and also in terms of like the candles themselves and their distinctness. Okay, now this is important. This is the one that I think I forget most often and I see people forget most often. It's kind of complicated. So let's just make sure that we get this. The order of lighting the candles. What candle do you light first? Okay, so I'm asking you a kind of silent pop quiz. See if do you know which candle you light first? Okay, so this is how it goes. On the first night, you start lighting with the rightmost candle. Now, even there, I always feel a little confused because like if it's facing outside, do I have to like turn around and make sure that I put it in the right? I think that's right. You have some sense that the right is the one that people see, but also the one that you're lighting. I'm never quite sure when you're lighting it up against the window exactly how that works, but the rightmost candle, you put it on the right. And why the right and not the left? I don't know. Hebrew starts on the right is probably the best explanation for that. But you put it on the rightmost candle, and then on the second night, you add a single candle next to it. You should start and you should bless on the candle that was added, which is more to the left, in order that you move to the right. I'm not sure that this is so clear in the translation. I'll explain it in plain English. And so too, on the third night, when you add an additional candle to the existing two candles, you begin with what was most recently added, and from there you begin the blessing. And afterwards you move to the right. So too on every subsequent night, you always make the blessing on the added candle, because this added candle teaches about the miracle, and with each additional day there was more of a miracle. Okay, so this is how it goes. You have your Chanukah, right? Let's see. Now I'm like totally twisted around. But like, okay, this is the what am I looking at? This is the right? This side is right for you? Is that right? Are we on the right? Okay, I'm so confused. Okay, so this is the first candle you light right here. First night, that's the candle. You've got one sticking up in the middle that you'll use to be the Shamish, and you'll light. You know what? I got a freaking Hanukkah. I'm gonna go get it. Seems so silly that I didn't think of this first. Okay, so here we go. Once again. Okay, first night is right here, right? And this is where the Shamish goes. Pro tip, by the way, these things get all full of wax, and the best thing to get the wax out is actually a corkscrew. So that's, if you learn nothing else tonight. Okay, so first night you light here, and then on the second night, you place another candle here, but you light now this way. So you light the second candle first and then the first candle, right? Third night, you light the third candle first, then the second candle, and then the first candle. Okay, that's the basic. And then on the eighth night, you start here and go all the way back. One thing that is not clear to me, and I'm curious whether you feel like you have an answer to this. Is there some order in which you actually place the candles? Do you think that's regulated by the law here? Like, do you have to place the candles in a certain order? It's not so clear to me. It sounds like, from the description, that the newest candle is the newest one added. So it actually sounds like, and I would recommend, that you actually place the candles one at a time, always starting on this side. So you always, this is still the right? You always start on the right side, and then you put that candle in, and then put this one in, and then light backwards. So you stack the candles in one direction, and then you light in the other direction. Okay? Are we clear on that? I don't know. I'm always forgetting that one. So I wanted to just sort of, what if they fall out? That is a good question. That is a good question. And by the way, that question brings us into the laws of Hanukkah, because if they fall out, you know what my instinct to do is to take that candle and put it over one of the other candles in order to get the wax soft and stick it in. Are we supposed to do that? No, we're not supposed to do that, because that's using the candle for some purpose other than Hanukkah, right? Although, I mean, technically, it is for Hanukkah, but for the Hanukkah light, okay? So that's something to keep in mind. It's another, common screw up of mine. All right, let's keep moving here. Any questions so far? Okay, all right. Let's keep moving. These classes make me so nervous, doing all the talking. All right, so first candle goes on the right side of the menorah, then we add one extra candle to the left every night, and we begin with the most recently added candle and light them with the shamash in order, moving right. Okay, that brings, yeah.
Okay, so do you light it from your perspective and then turn it around so that it's viewed by the public in that way, or are you lighting it backwards so that it is correctly viewed from the outside?
Yeah, that is exactly, I said that is where I feel some anxiety, but I think that you like this, you have to have the experience of lighting it in the way that they're telling you. When they say right and left, they certainly mean that you're looking at it and this is on your right and this is on your left. But I do think then if it's in a window that you would like turn it around and place it so that it displayed that to the world as well. So there's, and all of which is to say there's something very like, Hanukkah is a lot about perception and kind of a visual perspective. A lot of the laws here are thinking about how will you be able to observe the Hanukkah. So I do think, as kind of screwy and complicated as it sounds, I do think that if you're doing it in the window, that presents you with a bit of a challenge where you have to like light it, but then like turn it back around so that it faces the window the right way. Yes. Do you agree with me? You are also a rabbi, so let's have a rabbinic debate here. Okay. Okay, so anything else?
All right. Wait, are you supposed to light them outside so that people can share also in the experience of you lighting them?
Yeah, that's right. This is a kind of a very, like, this is such a rarefied law of Hanukkah that I didn't even add it, but it's great that your question raises it, which is that the laws, the Shulchan Aruch says that the mitzvah of Hanukkah is the lighting and not the placement. So actually, when you perform the mitzvah, you have to do it in the place that it will fulfill the mitzvah. So it being outside as the place means that you have to light it there as well, right? If you lit it in, I don't know, 20 cubit in a tree and then brought it to outside, you wouldn't have fulfilled the mitzvah. Right? Okay. Anything else? All right. So, okay, that clears up a common confusion of mine, the order of the candles. Now let's talk about the blessings. And the blessings are 3. And so, like, this is, another place where we sort of, I think, often get confused. Like, there are 2, but then there's 1 extra, and when do we say what? And okay, so there are 3, and I'll say before I read this that you say 2 blessings every night and 3 on the first night. Okay, it's just that simple. So the person who lights on the first night light makes 3 blessings: lahadlik ner Chanukah, and there's some debate over whether you say lahadlik ner shel Chanukah or lahadlik ner Chanukah. There are 2 nuschaot there. Then Sha'asa Nisim, who did miracles, and then Shehechianu. Shehechianu is a blessing that we say whenever we're performing a mitzvah for the first time that year. So it's just going to be on the first night of Hanukkah, but not on the second night of Hanukkah. If you didn't remember to say Shehechianu the first night, the law goes on to say, it's okay, you can say it the second night. You should say it at some point. Okay. After the first night, though, if you have said Shehechianu, then you make only 2 blessings, lahadlik ner Chanukah and Sha'asa Nisim. We're going to go over the text of these blessings. And then I just want, before we actually look at the blessings, I want to just point out that the Ramah here says that you should say all of the blessings before you begin to light. So now that answers an obvious question. Do you make the blessings after or before? And he says that you make all the blessings before. I will tell you that my custom, the way I was trained, was to make the first blessing, right? Lahadlik ner shel Chanukah, and then as you're making the second blessing, to begin to light the candles. That's what I do, but the way the Ramah seems to lay out the law, it's like make the blessing first there. So, and also, if you need to look at the text of the blessing, that's another good reason not to get confused and don't set yourself on fire. But my custom is to start lighting with the second blessing, but you could just say all three and then start lighting. Okay. So here are the blessings, and let's I'll sing them so that we have like the classic tune in our minds. But the blessings are, blessed are you, our eternal God, ruler of the universe, who has sanctified us with the commandments and commanded us. That's a standard opening for a blessing. Asher Kedishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu, and lahadlik ner, and you can see there's is shell in there or not, or is it just Chanukah? There are different practices, but the Hasidic minhag is to say just ner Chanukah, so that's what we'll say tonight. So it goes like this: Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner Chanukah. I can see that tune is designed for the shell. Shel Chanukah. Okay, and then my custom would be, as soon as I start on most nights, not on the first night. First night you got to say all three, but I would start Baruch atah. Okay, but that's not what the Ramah said. So let's just follow him. You say all the blessings. The second blessing is, blessed are you, our eternal God, ruler of the universe, who performed miracles for our ancestors in their days and this season. And that's Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asa nisim, who did miracles, la'avotenu, for our ancestors, bayamim hahem, in those days, bazman hazeh, at this time. So same tune. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asa nisim la'avotenu bayamim hahem bazman hazeh. And then on the first night, or the first night you remember to, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehechianu v'kimanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. That's a little bit of a funny one, who has kept us alive, sustained us, and brought us to this season, because it follows the nusach of Hanukkah for the first part, and then kind of switches to the classic right? So anyway, that's the sound of the candles. You can find this stuff online on YouTube. You can, if you want to practice, but that's the basic tune. Okay, now I said earlier that we were going to see the principle of not using the candles for any other purpose than just Hanukkah. And we're going to see that come up even in the liturgy. And it's true, we light the candles, and then there is a kind of a special declaration, which is it's not a blessing. I can think of other times in Jewish ritual where we recite something that is a formula but not a blessing. Like when you've searched through your house on Passover and tried to get rid of all the chametz, you make a declaration: if there is any chametz in this house, let it be nullified, right? So there are certain moments in Jewish ritual where you're not actually like sanctifying it with a blessing. You are somehow speaking out a reality. You're committing to, you're trying to articulate something just as a principle, and that is the case here. And the thing that we often will say after the blessings is Hanerot halalu. And here I'll read the English text first. We kindle these lights because of the miracles, the deliverances, and the wonders which, I obviously didn't retranslate this, which thou didst work for our ancestors by means of thy holy priests. During all the 8 nights of Hanukkah, these lights are sacred, and we are not permitted to use them, but only to gaze upon them, in order that we may give thanks and praise to your name for your miracles, your deliverances, and your wonders. Okay? probably standard tune for this is Hanerot halalu anu madlikim, Hanerot halalu anu madlikim, al hanisim ve'al haniflaot ve'al hatshuot ve'al hamilchamot she'asita lavotenu she'asita lavotenu bayamim hahem bayamim hahem bayamim hahem bazman hazeh. And then there's more to recite, and there's not enough song for the rest. So then you just mumble, right? So there are probably different tunes where that covers the entire span, but I'll just sing that again. Hanerot halalu anu madlikin, Hanerot halalu anu she'anu madlikin, al hanisim ve'al haniflaot ve'al hatshuot ve'al hamilchamot. She'asita lavotenu, she'asita lavotenu, bayamim hahem, bayamim hahem, bayamim hahem, bazman hazeh. I won't claim to be the songbird of Ikar, that's why we have Hillel, but that's the basic tune, okay? And this is a kind of a recitation of that principle. These lights, we're just gonna look at them, we're not gonna use them, okay? So that, and you have the transliteration here too if you want to print this out or use it. Okay, so that takes us, we basically got it. We have like the, where do you put it? When do you put it? How do you put it? How high do you put it? What order you put it in? What order do you light? What blessings do you say? This is starting to come together. I want to mention just a couple of important like exceptional cases. One, an exception that happens every Hanukkah, and one, an exception that could happen if you were traveling, okay? So one of the exceptions to the rule is Shabbat. And every Hanukkah has a Shabbat, right? Just think about it. It's 8 days long, right? There's gonna be a Shabbat in there. So, the question becomes, and actually the question's really twofold. The obvious question is, do you light the Hanukkah candles first or the Shabbat candles first? So let's answer that before we even look. Which one do you light first? Hanukkah candles or Shabbat candles on Friday night?
Hanukkah candles.
Hanukkah candles? Yeah, Sophia, why? You're right.
Oh, because then otherwise you're breaking the lighting flame.
Exactly. There's a logic to it. You light the Hanukkah candles first because once you light the Shabbat candles, the idea is no more lighting candles. That's the last act of the week. So you can't then go and light Hanukkah candles. So you light Hanukkah candles first. But that presents us with another kind of twist in our legal reckoning. Anybody like catch what that forces us to do? If you light the Hanukkah candles before Shabbat, you're lighting it before the sun goes down, right? I saw Rabbi Dina saying it, right? So before the sun goes down. So actually it is the case that you light Hanukkah candles on Friday night well before you would on any other night. And that's going to be true for us this week as well. We're going to have Hanukkah lightings every night at 5:30, but on Shabbat, our Hanukkah lighting is going to be at 4:15. So keep that in your schedule if you're going to join us for any of those things. And I should say, if I don't remember to say it, that we are having Hanukkah lighting online every night of Hanukkah, and we're going to have the lighting and some singing and some storytelling and some activities on different nights. So if you don't have a place to go for Hanukkah, please join us. We'll be together in this way that we've learned to be together online. Okay, so now let's see that law as it appears in the Shulchan Aruch. Before Shabbat begins, one should first light for Hanukkah and then for Shabbat. And the Ramah says, and they bless on them as they do on weeknights, even though they're lighting when it's still the daytime. Okay? So, and I've spoken out the logic here, but Sophia really intuited this for us just fine. I see a hand, Robert David Hirsch. Is that hand up for, oh, David, hi. I'm gonna ask you to unmute.
All right.
Yeah, there you go.
I may be ahead of ourselves, so come back to me towards the end.
Okay, all right. Well, we're almost done. So that's what you do on Shabbat. And by the way, I should just mention that at the end of Shabbat it goes the opposite way. that should also be fairly intuitive. You make Havdalah and then light the Hanukkah candles. Same principle. Until you have divided yourself away from the Shabbat, you don't light Hanukkah candles, because that would be one of the classic violations of Shabbat. Okay, so that's an exceptional case, but it's one that comes up every Hanukkah, so you should know it. Here is another exceptional case that I don't know if this is even worth mentioning, but it is one of the laws, and I used it when I was a yeshiva bacher traveling around on Hanukkah, and you may travel also. It is a time of traveling. A traveler who cannot light in their own home should give a pruta, a small amount of money, to the person they're staying with in order to have a share in the Hanukkah lighting there. This, by the way, does make it sound like it could be just one menorah for the whole house. It's just interesting, answering an earlier question of ours. But if you have your own entrance, you must light in your entrance, even though it's just like you're sleeping there and you're doing everything, you're eating with the family. But if you have your own entrance, now I'm not sure what an entrance means, if a door would be enough, just a door to your room. But certainly if you are in a hotel room or an Airbnb, you have to light your own, right? But if you're at somebody's house and it's complicated and do you have to bring your menorah with you and all of that, no, you can give them $1 and just say, this is as if, it's not as if I'm purchasing a share of the Hanukkah lighting in this house. Okay. Great. All right, that's pretty much it. There's one last law that I wanted to share, and to me, this law is there's a very deep reckoning for me that happens in this law, and the law is, remember, we started at the very beginning thinking about the kinds of oils and candles and wicks that we use for Shabbat, but what about for Hanukkah? And as I said at the outset, well, actually, they're not that strict. And the Shulchan Aruch it makes that clear. All types of oils and wicks are kosher for Hanukkah candles, even if the oil doesn't absorb well into the wick or the light doesn't hang, crappy wicks and oils, but everything's okay. You could use any kind of oil you want, with the exception of like pig fat, right? Like something that's actually non-kosher, but any kind of oil that you want, you can use. So listen to the Ramah step in. Now, I remember when I went to Israel and I was in yeshiva, and not only did I see these aquariums outside of people's houses, but I also saw people who were very particular on using oil, olive oil, and burning little cups of olive oil. And I thought to myself, well, now that makes sense. Like, it's oil. That was the miracle, was oil. And it's so beautiful, and it's so, like, they've really gone to all the trouble. And so there were a number of years where I was like, wow, that's the best way, the mehadrin, the best way to do it. And the Ramah says exactly that. He comes in and he says, wait, yeah, you can use any kind of oil you want, but olive oil is the best way to perform the mitzvah. But if olive oil is not available, then one should perform the mitzvah with any oil that gives pure, clean light. Okay? So this is the source for the idea that you really should use olive oil, right? And that's what I tried to do when I was a young, pious lad. But at a certain point, I started to feel like I miss the rainbow Hanukkah candles. Like, that's my childhood. Like, I don't want cups of oil. I want this thing. This is Hanukkah, right? Well, don't worry. The Ramah gives me anyway an out here. And he says, and I think this is just a fascinating moment in the evolution of Jewish law, where he says, and our custom in these lands, and he's talking about Eastern Europe, in our country, even though I've just said that oil is the best way and you should do it if you can, our custom in these lands is to light with wax candles because their light is radiant like oil. So there's your permission to use wax candles. And for me, that's like, that really, I've gone back to wax candles because that's what really feels like Hanukkah to me. And I think, in the construction, I wanted to just emphasize that, because in the construction of these like new laws, part of it is, trying to achieve the best possible, exactitude of the law, as we do with all of our laws. But there is also something in this newer kind of formulation of a law that I think we've seen all along is a little more capacious than most Jewish laws. Like, you could do it like this or this. Here's 3 options. Technically, you fulfilled it if it was this way. It could be, just don't get higher than 20 feet. Just don't get lower than 3. There's a lot of actually variability in Hanukkah. As precise as we have been as our language has been this last hour, thinking about, oh, from right to left and left, there is a lot of variability, and I encourage you to pick the applications of the law that really speak most strongly to your soul. Okay, I think that's it. Let me look here. I'm going to turn to David to see if he has any final question for us, and then we're going to sing one last song together. David?
I do.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, by the way.
My pleasure.
This was an uncharacteristic hour at Ikar. And I'm wondering, and I have been for a while, what the meta message of this hour is to be, has been from your perspective. Why did you choose to teach this and this way?
Well,
what are we to understand in the meta dimension of Jewish practice?
Yeah. It's a really good question. I mean, I think when you say it's an uncharacteristic hour, I think what you mean is like, we're not talking about the deeper meaning behind it all. We're not like thinking and analyzing through like the profound messages embedded in this holiday. Instead, we're just sort of, like giving you the 101, the information. And I think that my answer to that question is that, I prefer doing the other stuff. Like that's the most exciting and interesting stuff, is to talk about like the symbolism, the meaning, and I especially like doing that work in a pluralistic community where there's no dogma and we can all just sort of like interpret freely, and we can bring different meanings to the holiday, and we can question the meaning of the holiday, and we can really be in that sort of beautiful, messy dialogue around this tradition. Mm-hmm. But I think that one of the challenges that a kind of a pluralistic or liberal Jewish community often falls into is that we're so busy kind of rethinking and analyzing and questioning everything that we often aren't actually prepared when it comes to just knowing how to do a thing. And honestly, my goal in this last hour is just, I want Ikar to be like knowledgeable and prepared and confident in the performance of the mitzvot. We are a pluralistic community, which means that people are going to choose different practices, and nobody's going to be like judging you or pushing on you. And we're a pluralistic community, so we can also look at the holiday in different ways and debate the holiday in different ways and analyze it from a historical perspective, from a religious perspective. There's something very free flowing and beautifully, I'll use this word again, capacious about learning in this kind of community. But I'm always also aware that often means that we haven't done some of the like kind of nuts and bolts basic work. And I want our community to be free thinking and free choosing, but doing so from a place of confidence and preparedness and knowledge. So that's been the point of the last hour.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, with that said, let's end. And this is also part of the teaching, because it is also important to know that the standard pieces of Hanukkah lighting liturgically are the 3 blessings, which we did, Hanero Talalu, the recitation of these candles being holy, and then finally, it is very common to sing Ma'oz Sur, and it is also very common only to sing the first stanza because it is such a complicated song. The words themselves are very intricate and tricky and unusual. And actually, if you go and read Ma'oz Sur, they're also a little appalling because it's about like our enemies trying to destroy us and us just killing them back. So it's like, it's a beautiful song with a very, very like, tricky messaging, but as it is, let's at least learn the tune if we don't know it, or let's sing it together. And you can sing it with me. I know that it doesn't work as well to unmute, but sing it along and you can hear at least my voice and yours together. And we'll just sing the first stanza here, and I have the transliteration down here. And the tune is Ma'oz Sur Yeshuati Lechana el Shabeach Tikon betefilati ושם תודה נזבח, לתכין מטבח, מצר המנבח, אז אגמור בשיר מזמור, Chanukah HaMizbeach, and we sing the fourth line in the stanza twice. Az egmor b'shir mizmor, Chanukah HaMizbeach. All right, so that's it. Wishing everybody a happy Hanukkah. Please join us for all of our candle lightings. We'll have candle lightings at 5:30, and we love it if you join us in the Zoom itself, though I guess we do put them on Facebook. You can see it that way. All right, please feel free to take this this source sheet. I hope it'll be useful to you even without me rambling my way through it. Any last questions that people have before we sign out? Anything unclear, anything didn't get answered tonight, Sophia?
Yeah. So I've heard that some people think that the Shamish has to be in the middle. Is that
is not correct.
Okay, like is it?
I mean, I don't know. I'm sure some people think so for good reason. And the reason that they would think so is that it mirrors the menorah from the Mishkan. It sort of looks the same. Is the Chanukah like a little menorah? And it makes sense that it would be because it's commemorating the relighting of the menorah, right? So that, but that's not what it says in the laws. In fact, in the laws, did we see this tonight? This is like the bonfire thing. Did we see that? Yeah, it was like you shouldn't just like, you could, if you needed to, you could just light from a bonfire, right? So it doesn't actually really matter where the Shamish is. What matters about it is that it is not one of the Chanukah candles.
Great, thanks.
Anybody else? All right. Okay, well, this has been another edition of your pre-holiday boot camp. Thanks, David, for the question that helped me clarify some of my intentions around this. And I'm always open to feedback. If you feel like these things are useful, not useful, you'd like a little more something or a little less something, please let me know. And that's it. See you. Happy Hanukkah. Bye, everyone.